Okay, well, let's go ahead and get rolling because the more I prep, the longer the lesson got. So hope y'all are ready. We're going to be drinking from a fire hose tonight. So I don't know if y'all have noticed, but there's been a lot of angst in the culture lately. There's been a lot of heightened emotions and people rather passionate about their being offended at other people, right? What you could flat out call a culture of hate. And there just seems to be so much hate. You can see on the news, if you are unwise enough to go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, videos where you can just see people screaming and yelling at each other. There just seems to be this heightened hatred that's growing in our culture. And one thing that really jumped out at me, and this is actually what I was going to address, and then I decided to broaden it. There is a book, it's a prayer book, and one of the prayers, it starts out, "Dear God, help me to hate white people." And then it goes on about the kinds of white people she wants to hate and why she wants to hate them. And I was going to do a response to that, but I decided, there's a much broader issue here than just one person's writings in one progressive book. There's actually a guy that I occasionally use his material, and he's a great resource, Mike Winger. He's got a website called BibleThinker.org.com, whatever. And I put a link to his video where he goes in depth. He reads through word for word and dissects the whole chapter of the book. And that's really good. I'd suggest that if you got the time. But I saw that, and it's just like the hate. She's wanting to hate people. And this is someone who is a professor at, I forget where. I meant to write it down. She's a professor at a university who teaches theology, religion. I think she would claim to be a Christian. And so here we go, and she's got that. And then you can't hardly turn on the news or read the news without seeing something of someone just kind of almost going crazy. Got a few headlines here, right? You'll never mind the kind of hyperbolic labeling, but it says crazy leftist caught on camera screaming slash Republicans' throats. It was at some event, and he's just screaming at the conservative students that were doing whatever presentation or whatever display. He's screaming at them that he wants to slash Republican throats. I believe he's actually under investigation. Police took that one seriously. You have a soccer player, I believe it's in Virginia, who the team decided they were going to support Black Lives Matter, the organization. And one of the things they did is while something was read over the PA, the team took a knee. Well, there's one student who said, "I cannot support that organization. Yes, I believe Black people matter, but that organization, I cannot agree with them." So she didn't kneel. And she's now suing the school because the coach made her life a living hell, to where she eventually felt no other option but to leave the team. And so there she got singled out and mistreated because she said, "I'm not going to support that organization." Here's one where a teacher actually goes off yelling at a student for his white privilege. And then at another point in the video is actually ranting about parents who might have a problem with her methods. And she was, I don't even know what the subject was, but apparently she was teaching on this whole thing about Black people and white privilege and whatnot. And the student asked basically, so if you can have a Black student union, can you also have a white student union? And the teacher snapped, because that's white privilege. White people are oppressors. And And so here you have an adult who's supposed to be in a position of authority and responsibility, mistreating and bullying a child in her class. Child, young adult, teenager. Here's one where outside of a diner in New York, right? It's outside dining. There's people there dining. Black Lives Matter protesters are screaming at the, what even all white, restaurant goers, people sitting there eating, that they need to leave, that they're not wanted here, that they don't want white people there. We don't need you white people. We don't need your white restaurant. And oddly enough, it's a taqueria, but the owner is white. But he said he loved Mexican food so much, he took the time to perfect his, ability to make it because he loved Mexican food. But they were screaming, white people, get out of here. We don't want you. This one, I don't know if you saw this one. An unhinged teacher flips out on peaceful anti-lockdown protesters in Oregon and throws out some expletives as she does it. And if you watch the video, she actually, she's so busy screaming at the protesters that she hits the car in front of her because she's in her car and she's practically hanging out of her car, screaming at them, got her, one finger waves up in the air and actually runs into the car in front of her. But it was a peaceful protest. They don't like the idea that the government had shut down their businesses, so they were protesting. And she was so angry about that, she had to cuss them out and yell and scream at them. There's this is a little clip, it's about a minute or so long. It's from a documentary called Paint the Wall Black. And if you haven't seen it, I would suggest you do. It is very good.
Why is Nini's Chicago's best?
What makes Nini's truly Chicago best is our love for people and our love for our community.
Every time I come in, they treat you like your family.
I like that they're so personable.
It's like being in your family's house.
Kwani just makes this a really welcoming environment.
We made a post saying we believe all lives matter because all lives are made in the image of God. And when I posted that, all hell broke loose.
A popular deli in downtown Chicago is no longer in business after a campaign to destroy their business was launched when they didn't fully support the Black Lives Matter movement.
And I let them know, if y'all are gonna come protest, we're gonna come preach.
And the title there, Paint the Wall Black, is because, I don't know if you noticed, the walls of the restaurant were that pink. It was right in the corner and it was all pink. And because they wouldn't come out in support of Black Lives Matter, all of that broke out. People actually came and painted their, pink wall, which is kind of a landmark. They were a famous restaurant, number one in the city, sometimes. Had documentaries and things. I mean, they were a popular part of the community. And they kind of stood out because they had that bright pink wall right on the corner, and people came and painted the wall black because they wouldn't support Black Lives Matter. So we have all this hate. I mean, we have people who claim to be followers of Christ saying, Lord, help me to hate white people. You got all these people who are attacking others who just nothing, but they have a different point of view. You got restaurant owners that are being told, run out of business. They had to leave town. I mean, they were in danger. He had family members who weren't even associated with the restaurant who got fired from their jobs just for being related to him. I think right now, over the voter bill in Georgia, Home Depot was facing attempted boycott because some corporations were like, let's get together and support, the voting thing. And Home Depot basically said, we're not getting involved because they refused to get involved. They weren't even taking an unpopular position. They just said, we're neutral. No, you don't get to be neutral. So where does all of this come from? All of this hate. The devil, yeah. I once heard, and I don't know that it is unique to him. I think he got it from somewhere, but I heard it from John Stonestreet. He said, ideas have consequences. Bad ideas have victims. So what happens are people get these bad ideas that take root in their minds, and they manifest in this hatred and bad actions. So let's look at a handful of these bad ideas and what they are. Post-Modernism, you may have heard that word. It hadn't been quite as unpopular, in vogue, the last 5 years or so. But it was real big, 20 years ago. That was the big thing churches were talking about. Watch out for postmodernism. You have what's called standpoint epistemology. The word epistemology just means the study of knowledge, how you know things. We'll get into these a little bit more in depth. You have critical theory, which we have talked about, and I think is one of the big kind of cornerstone ideas in all of this. And then intersectionality, where a lot of these kind of come together and the fruit that they bear. So let's take a look at, All right, well, I forgot how my slide went. Let's go back and take a look at these. Postmodernism, okay, this idea of postmodernism, it's basically that there's no such thing as truth, right? We came through the modern era where it was all about objective truth and science, and put aside the superstition. Let's figure out what is real. And so postmodern, or people say, well, there is no objective truth, right? We have to find, but whatever we believe, whatever our version of truth happens to be, that reason and logic, right? Those don't always apply. Sometimes those aren't the right way to go. But there's no such thing as human nature, right? That people are blank slates, and it's just however society kind of constructs you is who you are. The idea that there's nothing we can know for certainty, and there's no kind of overall plan or design or reason for anything. And so that's the kind of basic gist of postmodernism. You have standpoint epistemology. This is the idea that your standpoint from where you are, you have knowledge that no one else can have, and so they need to listen to you. Specifically, this has to do with like marginalized groups. This came about from feminists, I think back in like the 60s or 70s. And the idea was, you don't know what it's like to be a woman, so you can't speak on these things, right? You probably heard those kind of ideas before. Just to give a definition, I think I got this from a website called New Discourses. Not a Christian site, but they've got a lot of useful information. It says that one social position relative to systemic power, we'll get into some of that with critical race theory, gives additional insight or access to knowledge that allows the oppressed person to understand both their oppression and the society or systems it operates in better than the privileged people. So the idea being, you hear people talk about white privilege, and black people being oppressed. The idea is that the white people, we don't know. See, that they have more knowledge because of their vantage point. They have better access to special knowledge. Vodi Bakum, who is a African-American preacher, and he is a firecracker, he calls it ethnic Gnosticism. Gnosticism was a heresy back in the early church where basically people claimed you have to have special knowledge. Gnostic comes from the Greek word for knowledge. And they had special knowledge. And so the idea is that because of your race, if you're a person of color, you can have special knowledge, but you white people, you just don't know. Your group identity, right, your social position gives you that special knowledge, and thus your voice, what you have to say, is more authoritative. Is how this, you'll see this manifest in things like whenever a man will, give an argument about why abortion is wrong, and someone says, "You don't have a say. You're not a woman. You can't know what it's like." Well, that's got nothing to do with it. Is it wrong or is it not? And they say, no, only women can. Men, you don't get a say. The whole Me Too thing, believe all women. Why would you believe all women? Can women not lie? No. Women are marginalized and oppressed. So you just have to believe them because they have better knowledge than you. My favorite is the idea that math is racist. What's said to be correct math, that's imposed on you from your white oppressor people, right? Someone else may have a different view of math. But that's the gist of standpoint epistemology, that people have access to special knowledge because of who they are, and it puts them in a more authoritative position. Then you have critical theory. I'm not going to go into depth. We actually did a 2-part series on this, I think it was last year. I would recommend you go watch that if you have not. The videos should be on the website. If not, they're actually linked in this video. So, critical theory. This focuses on your group identity. You're not an individual. You're a member of a group. You're white, you're woman, you're male. That is who you are. And then the groups are either labeled as oppressor or oppressed, depending on who's got social power or who's got, minority or majority position in society. If you're the majority group, you're automatically the bad guy because you're kind of lording your way over the minorities. If you're the minority group, you're automatically the good guy because you're the victim. You poor thing. Ladies, you're automatically a victim because you're women. There is no middle ground. There is no neutral. You either are an oppressor or you are oppressed. And it focuses on that the point is to fix it, so you need what's called equity, right? Not equality. Equality is everyone's treated the same. Equity means everybody has the same. So if there's any kind of imbalance, then it has to be fixed. And if that means take it away from them to give to them, then that's what they say is needed to make it all even. One of the problems, and they are many, that you get here is it's an oversimplification of the other person. If you have this way of thinking embedded in your point of view, you're always going to stereotype and generalize and oversimplify the other person. It devalues people as an individual because, Greg, you're not an individual. You're a white male. And so whenever I see you, I don't think, Greg, I see white male, right? That really devalues who you are by putting you into these categories. One of the kind of main philosophers, activists, scholars, whatever you want to call them, who kind of bringing a lot of this together a few decades ago, named Kimberly Crenshaw, says, we can all recognize the distinction between the claim, I am black, and the claim, I am a person who happens to be black. I am black takes the imposed identity and empowers it. So they're saying that if someone identifies as black, it's empowering to them. So taking your group identity empowers you, is what she says. Meanwhile, as I am a person who happens to be black, achieves self-identification by straining for a certain universality. In effect, I am a person first. The crazy thing is, I want to say yes and amen. You're a person first. Before you are a white person, or you are a man, or you are a woman, you're a person. That's the more important thing. But she's actually meaning this the opposite. She's saying that it's a bad thing that you're a person first, that you really need to identify as your group. And I forgot to put the picture in. Oh, man. During the civil rights era, there was actually protests where black people would be protesting. They were holding signs that said, I am a man. Not a black man, but just a man. I'm human, just like everybody else. We're all the same. That was the point of the civil rights movement was, I'm not my skin color. We're all equal. We're all human. One of the things that this way of thinking does, viewing everybody as oppressor and oppressed and as their group identity, I love this. I heard someone say it, and I thought, ooh, that's good. I've got to steal that. It turns planks into specks and specks into planks. Think about where Jesus said, before you worry about the speck in your brother's eye, why don't you worry about the plank in your own eye? Well, this turns all that around, because in this way of thinking, the victims, they downplay their own faults, and then they over-exaggerate the faults of the oppressors. Think about what we saw over the last year. As cities burned and billions of dollars in property damage was done and dozens of people died, well, what were we hearing? People were making excuses. Oh, well, they've been oppressed. They've been marginalized. They're just giving voice to their anger. You're justifying riots and destruction and murder. Well, but they're oppressed. See how that twists that? Meanwhile, oppressors get hammered over the slightest thing. Did you see the story about a girl who was asked to leave a dorm that was closed? The dorm was closed. No one's supposed to be in there. Well, she went in there for a quiet place to eat her lunch, and she happened to be a black girl. And a custodian saw her, and as he had been told to do, called campus security. Campus security came. They informed her, hey, you're not supposed to be here. It's closed to the public. You can go eat out here. Well, then she turned around and made some rant, I think on, Twitter or TikTok or some social media thing, talking about how, she got in trouble because she was eating while black, and these racist, university wouldn't let her eat her lunch. And it actually ended up being where the security guard and the custodian got fired. They did nothing wrong. All they did was politely ask someone, hey, no one's supposed to be in here. Can you please leave? But see, that got blown up out of proportion. Why? Well, because they're white guys and she's black. So obviously they were bad. There was a girl who lost her scholarship, was rejected by the university she was planning on going to, because years before, when she had gotten her license, she had done something stupid and put a little video up on Facebook or whatever, where she threw out a racial slur, which is a very common racial slur in all kinds of hip hop and rap lyrics you can hear all over the radio. But here's this 15-year-old girl going, hey, I can drive, and well, one of her classmates recorded that, saved that, and then now towards the end of her senior year, oh, hey, look at this racist. And all of a sudden she's losing her scholarship. She's being kicked out of the college she was going to go to. Why? That hatred, it churns this hatred where you can't look at someone and go, oh, that, dumb kid made a mistake. It has to be something they must be punished for because they're an oppressor. Then you got intersectionality. This one is nuts, like the others weren't. Intersectionality is that you don't belong just to one group. You belong to multiple groups. And the ways that they intersect and interact in society is something you have to pay attention to. So for instance, ladies, you're white, but you're also women. And so you're oppressed because you're women, but you're privileged because you're white. And so according to intersectionality, you have to be aware of how your privilege and your oppression are interacting in the different situations that you were in society. Actually, it requires that you recognize in all social interactions that there are systems of power, racism, sexism, and so on, and these are always in play and always have to be acknowledged, especially by the dominant person. Because remember, standpoint epistemology, the oppressed person, they already know. But the person who's privileged, you're the one that it's all on you. You see how this can automatically set up all kinds of social strife and animosity if all of your social interactions are supposed to be viewed through these lenses? It just creates division and conflict in all your relationships. If you throw together standpoint epistemology and postmodernism, you actually get this idea of storytelling. See, because postmodernism is not interested in facts and truth, it's interested in stories. What is your truth? Tell me your experience. That's where you find what's true according to postmodernism. Well, now you combine that with the fact that you have a point of view that is authoritative, and now no one can tell you you're wrong. It's your truth. And it is immune to criticism. How dare you tell me I didn't experience what I experienced? Have you ever experienced something only later to find out, oops, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I didn't understand what was going on. I saw that wrong. I misunderstood. Right? We all do that all the time. According to this, the victim automatically wins the argument. So all of these taken together, they're training you, if you're taking in these ideas, which a lot of people are, they train you to take offense in everything. All of your social interactions are about power. Who's dominant? Who's the oppressor? Who's the oppressed? How's that interacting? This is where you get things like microaggressions. There's a popular book by Robin DiAngelo called White Fragility, and she says that all relationships are racist. The question isn't if there's racism, the question is how is the racism playing out? And so, in everything, if you're seeing racism in everything, you get offended at little things. There's places where people have gotten in trouble because they'll say something like, hey, where are you from? And that's a microaggression. See, that's racist because you're assuming they're from somewhere else, that they're other than you, This is literally what people say. It boggles the mind that people think this way, but they do. All the talk that you hear about dog whistles. Oh, that's a racist dog whistle. Well, of course it has to be, because they see racism in everything. This way of thinking necessarily creates division and hate. It twists the minds of people who think this way, and it embitters people who are targeted by it. There are movements out there who are actually, this is a recruitment drive for white supremacy groups. People who are getting fed up with all the talk of racists and white people are bad are going to the open arms of white supremacist groups. Because at least that's someone who's standing up for them. So, whenever we see these hateful things that are going on, right? Well, it makes sense. If the Republican Party represents the dominant white oppressors of minorities, colonizers, and the police are just out hunting down black people, well, it makes sense why someone who's maybe a little unhinged is going to make those connections to, I got to kill Republicans because they're the bad guys. Soccer player refused to kneel. There's no neutral. You're either an oppressor or you're with the oppressed. Pick a side. Well, you didn't kneel, so that must mean you're one of the oppressors. Teacher yelling at a student? Of course. Why would you think you could have a white student union? You're the oppressors. You already own society. It's actually an example of a university that opened a brand new multicultural center. And there's all these students just sitting around, chilling on their computers, on their phones, hanging out. And this black girl just goes off screaming at the white people that they're not welcome there. They have the rest of the campus they can go hang out in. This is for people of color. That's this mindset, the way it twists people's thinking. White people are the bad guys. So of course, you don't want them there. Would you want a bunch of oppressors and privileged racists around you? Of course, you're going to flip out at protesters that you think are oppressing, their way of doing things. They're a danger to you. Right? Of course, you're going to shut down that restaurant because they weren't standing with you, so they must be against you. That's the way this ideology forms things. Of course, we're going to have to ask God to help us hate white people because white people are the bad guys. if you have this way of thinking. Okay, but what does the Bible teach? I mean, here's like, we see what people are doing there. What does the Bible teach? The Bible teaches that truth is not inside of us. It's not my truth and my perception and my feelings and what I want. The Bible actually teaches truth is something outside of us. We have an orderly creation. God made an orderly universe that operates by certain rules and certain conventions, and that's just the way it is, whether we like it or however we feel about it or not. It just is what it is. You're not supposed to find the truth inside you. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitful and wicked. You know, I'm sorry, Disney. I'm not going to trust my heart. I know my heart. It's deceitful and wicked. Right thinking begins with God. Doesn't begin with you. Proverbs 9:10, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Oh, you want to know about life? You want to know about what's right and wrong? You want to know about truth? You got to start with God. Not you, but God. 1 Corinthians 13:12 says that we now see through a glass darkly. The idea is there that you're trying to look through a window that's kind of, dim, maybe it's a little foggy, a little blurry, you can't really see, so we don't have a full picture, a good understanding of what's going on. So we can't start with ourselves to find truth, we start with God. The Bible says that you are not defined by your group. Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created, a male and female, he created them. Your identity is not in your group. Your identity is that you are created in the image of God. You, an individual, in the image of God. Genesis 3:20. Man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. All means all. In Acts 17:26, he says that God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. We are not identified by groups because we're all the same. There's one race, the human race. Galatians 3:28, there's neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, or male or female. You are all one in Christ. All those group identities that we have, and there's a place for them. But they're not central. They don't define who we are. There's something that's true about us, but they don't define us. The Bible teaches equality, not equity. It is literally impossible to have equal outcomes. Y'all have siblings? Same parents, same home, same schools, same opportunities, same support. Did y'all end up the same? No. Because people make different decisions. Outcomes are going to be different. We don't even have the same outcomes in heaven and hell. Bible talks about that greater will be a reward. Hey, the person who does this will be greater. Talks about those who will have a greater degree of punishment in hell. It's not even equal in heaven, or at least not equity. It's equal in that we all have the opportunity to follow after God to earn the rewards. We don't. Leviticus 19:15 says, do not pervert justice, do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Well, that's not what our society is saying today. Society wants to punish the rich, punish the privileged, and just give people a pass. Because they're oppressed. They've been discriminated against in the past. James 2:9 actually says if you show partiality, you are committing a sin. You're not supposed to show favoritism, whether it's out of favoritism towards the rich and powerful, or even out of compassion for the poor. Proverbs 6:30-31 says, people do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he is hungry, but if he is caught, he will pay sevenfold and he will give the goods of his house. That was the punishment. Stealing, you had to repay. It says, you may not feel bad for the guy who's stealing because he's hungry, but he still stole, and he's still got to pay the punishment. You don't give him special treatment just because you feel bad for him. regarding this idea of seeing enemies and oppressors everywhere, right? Of getting offended because people have said or done little things, reading racist motives into everything. According to the Bible, love is not easily offended. 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Did you notice the part right there in the middle? It does not dishonor, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. If you are living a life of loving other people, even if someone gives you a little slight, even if someone is careless with a word or an insult, intended or not, it says love's not easily angered. You let it roll off you. You shrug it off. Let it pass. You forgive. Okay, so what do? We got these ideas. They're pushing this hate. They're just twisting people's hearts and minds all around full of hate. What do? Go to Belize. What's in Belize? Not here? Nothing. There you go. First off, we have to understand these ideas. We just do. These are the ideas that are swirling around in the culture around us. I don't know that we have the opportunity and the option of just, staying ignorant anymore, just sitting and going, let's, I think we need to be aware of what's going on in the culture around us. We have to guard our own minds. Garbage in, garbage out. Watch what you're putting in your mind. Pay attention. Guard yourself. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world. Well, these bad ideas are what the world's teaching. Don't fall for them. 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. There's a reason why people are believing these things, even in the church, because at first blush, they actually sound pretty good. I mean, equality and justice, right? I mean, don't you want black people to be equal? Sounds good, but you got to pay attention and guard yourself against the poison pill they're trying to slip in with those nice tasting words. We have to hold one another accountable. You don't just guard yourself, you guard one another. Now, this is going to require that we actually let people hold us accountable. That one's not easy. It's really easy just to tell someone, mind your own business. Well, but we need to let our brothers and sisters talk to us whenever we start getting out of line. Right? Proverbs says that iron sharpens iron. That's not a pleasant process. You ever, sharpen a knife or something, it's grinding away, sparks flying. An enemy multiplies kisses, but the wounds of a friend can be trusted. Sometimes you got to just let someone be able to hurt your feelings for your own good. Whenever you're doing something stupid, you need to have people in your life that can say, hey, that's stupid. Don't do it. James says we should confess our sins to one another and pray for one another that there might be healing. That's talking about spiritual healing. You got to confess your sins to one another. We need to support one another. This is one that I've been wrestling with, because how exactly this would need to look and how we'd go about doing this, but I think there's only so much a limited time that we can sit back and rest on the fact that we're in Moody, McLennan County, Texas, to think that's something those crazy people over there are doing. Well, what's going to happen whenever your employer comes and says, okay, here's what you got to do? Well, what if they're saying, all right, we're going to take a stand for this, Black Lives Matter organization. And you go, oh, I can't do that. And it's your job on the line. Well, if you know your brothers and sisters have your back, you're a little more likely to stand up and go, no, can't do it. emotionally, morally, friendship-wise, maybe even monetarily. We got each other's back where we can take a stand for truth. We need to know that our church family has our back if the mob comes after us. We need to recognize that there's actually some real problems out there in society that are the reasons people are falling for these things. I mean, the fact is, majority of black people compared to majority of white people do live in poverty. Okay. Most inner city schools that are predominantly minority are pretty bad schools. Okay, these are real problems. How do we deal with them? One of the things that happens is that a lot of times someone comes out and they come with the critical race theory, and our radar goes off and all the alarm bells go off and we're fighting against the critical race theory. But what they see is us dismissing the problem. I mean, it's right, we need to fight against the false ideas, but we also need to recognize that there's a real problem they're upset about. Maybe we need to take a look at that and be a little more gentle. We need to do what Jesus taught. Hey, there's a crazy idea. We're followers of Christ. Let's look at what Jesus said and actually do it. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 says, "You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." By the way, that's nowhere in the Old Testament, nowhere in the Bible that it says to hate your enemy. That first part, love your neighbor, that's from the Bible. That second part, hate your enemy, that's from the teachings of rabbis. You've heard it said to love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Excuse me. Where'd I go? For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what good is that? What reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than the others? Do not even the tax collectors do that? Therefore, you shall be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Think about this. The lady who was saying, Lord, help me to hate white people. Really? Because this says you're supposed to love them. You're supposed to love your enemy. Oh, you're only going to love the people. If you actually read in that prayer where she says, help me to hate white people. Oh, and I don't mean the white people who agree with me. I don't want to hate them. So you love the people who love you back? Who cares? That's easy. Everyone does that. Jesus says, no. Love your enemies. That's who you need to love. By the way, that is impossible to do if you have these other ideas what are leading your thinking. Critical race theory makes it impossible to love people the way God has commanded us to. The gospel is the solution. People don't just need to have their ideas changed. They don't just need to learn to change their behavior. Hey, that's good. Take what I can get. People need changed hearts. The church should be the example of where all of these group identities don't mean a thing. You look back at the early church, and whenever Paul was saying there's neither Jew nor Greek, male or female, rich or poor, for all are one in Christ, they were all together in one place. You'd have the rich guy with the nice robes in the house up on the hill sitting right next to the guy who's sitting down the street begging and doesn't have a place to live. But they're both equal before Christ. Men and women, whatever other social things are going on in the church, equal before Christ. I like this. As we draw closer to God, we draw closer together. Make sense? How can you be far apart from each other when you're all hanging out with the same people? If you're all hanging out with God, you're hanging out with each other. So how do we come together? We come to God. We need the gospel. It says people turn to Christ and draw close to God, that they're actually drawing close to everyone else too. As we all crowd in and gather around God. We crowd in and gather around each other. So we come closer together because of the gospel. There's my rant. Questions?
That's exactly what these groups deal in people. That's what they would love to do is, of course, very good. But to really get everybody motivated to do something about all this is today, if they have a book burn. When they start burning the Holy Bible in the streets, and really need to get a reaction out of if they start burning Koran. And then you're going to get these nuts that's going to take these people out. That's what I think.
Well,
I know we're
yeah.
supposed to love our neighbor, but I mean, you're going to really upset some people
Well,
when they start burning the Bible. And that's going to.
and they have. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was a BLM rally, and I don't know if it was BLM or Antifa or something, as everything was getting out of hand, burning the flag, and someone tossed a Bible in there too, and burned that. They burned down a church. Everybody wants to, get their panties in a twist over Trump going over to the church for a photo op. Well, he couldn't have done that if it wasn't for the fact that they had burned it the day before. The church. What's that got to do with anything? Why are you burning that down? Mm-hmm. Well, it was mostly peaceful. Mostly peaceful. Yeah. That's what it was. Campfire got out of. Mm-hmm. So. Yep.
Mark, I travel 60, 70 miles radius, and we are actually in a bubble. Because I see a lot of people, and so do you, that we're all like-minded. I have not met somebody that doesn't believe in our food as far as all this deal.
Yeah, we are in a bubble. There's a bubble over the.
If you just go home and unplug your TV, we wouldn't know what's going on. It's
Yeah.
not around here, but it's going to be.
Well, and that's one of those things where, everyone has to make a decision for themselves. What level of information can you take in without it poisoning your heart? I've mentioned before, there was a point in time, I don't know, 15 years ago where, man, it was between like Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh. Molly said, "You stop. You're grounded from talk radio. I'm sick of it." Because all I was doing is griping all the time. Oh, can you believe what they're doing? She just said, "Stop. Where's that happy guy that I married?" It was making me bitter. Right? You have to know where's your line. But we do need to be informed. I remember, and I've said before, having a conversation with someone about, whenever same-sex marriage was the big thing. It's like this came out of nowhere. And someone, it was on Facebook, I forget what I'd mentioned, something about, it came out of nowhere. And someone who was from like Southern California said, "No, I've been talking about this for decades. Where you been?" Well, I've been in Central Texas where nobody else thinks that way. Little did I know that, all these ideas that we're talking about here, right? The standpoint epistemology, the Post-Modernism, the intersectionality, you realize this is like 30, 50, 60, 70 years old. A lot of this came out of the 60s, 70s. It's been around a while, just not around here. Yeah, last 100 days. Yeah, it was. Well, and
You get brought up like that, that's not.
all we can do is preach the gospel and love people. Take care of each other. Like I said, guard our own minds. Take care of each other. And then the people who are believing this stuff, who are pushing it, even fighting against us because we believe different, Jesus says love them. I mean, sure, you could just love the people who are just like you, but anyone can do that, right? Even the multiple convicted murderer sitting on death row, he loves people that like him. Anyone can do that. You gotta love your enemy. These people that hold these ideas that we would want to look at and go, that's so insane. Why would you think that? You still gotta love them. As they throw insults and expletives, still gotta love them. Come after your job, your family. Jesus says love them.
That's exactly what the restaurant owner tried to do too. He tried to share the gospel with all of those people.
Yeah.
He did exactly what Jesus asked him to do.
Yep. And
And he gets accused of being hateful.
I would really suggest you go watch that. It's called Paint the Wall Black. Look it up on YouTube.
It's about an hour.
Yeah.
Good.
It's about an hour. And like he said there in the teaser, he said, all right, well, if they're going to come protest, we're going to come preach. And he got his church. They came and they set up a little PA system outside the restaurant. And whenever the protesters started coming, they got out there, started preaching the gospel, which made a lot of them more mad. But that's how spiritual warfare tends to go. You start speaking the truth, the people who are thrown in with the demonic start to really not like that. So, but yeah, I mean, through the whole thing, they were just so kind and loving and calm.
Texas gang is there in Dallas.
Yeah, now they're in Dallas. Yeah. The owner of that restaurant, they got chased out of town. They're all family, extended family. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they got like followed to their car, and surrounded. You need to go watch the documentary. It's pretty good. But all this hate, all these ideas that are stirring up people to hate. And it's so sad to see people that I know, they're decent people who think they're doing the right thing, but they're buying into these ideas that really can do nothing. There is no end result to critical race theory except division and conflict. And so how do we respond? We respond with love. And whenever they say false things, we respond with the truth in love. And whenever they say mean things, we respond with love. Whenever they come after us, we respond with love. That's what Jesus tells us to do. Some people will be won over, others won't. But I've read the end of the book. Good guys win.